Magic reveals itself to those who remember where to look for it. This is Magic Hour, and I'm your host, Taylor Page. Hi, my loves. Taylor Page here. If you are listening to this episode the day it comes out, Wednesday, August 7th, then you are just in time to join me this evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time or get the replay link for Leo Season Earth Angel Club. We are celebrating the magic of the 888 portal. I'm doing a beautiful guided meditation with Archangel Uriel all about reclaiming your highest power. I'm going to share ritual suggestions for how to maximize this magical 888 portal, as well as give an astrology update, an energy update, and it's just going to overall be a really magical time, and I cannot wait to share it with you. Another benefit of Earth Angel Club is that you can sign up for any angel reading or birth chart reading or mediumship reading and get priority registration with me. If you want to join, please sign up at angelsandamethyst.com. The angel reading tier is sold out, but the general admissions tier still has tickets, and I would love to see you there. Welcome back to Magic Hour, everyone. I am your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm your producer, Claire. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
At the time of recording, we are just before the Cancer new moon and sort of in this portal of what I'm calling spiritual growing pains. And I wanted to talk about this on the podcast because I talk about it a lot on Instagram and to my subscriber community. But I just wanted to share it in case people aren't online or on social media, that the astrology is a little bit deceptive right now because it seems simple and like not very much is going on, but it's deceptively simple because we're in a big moment of change, transformation, upgrades, and the parts of ourselves that we're co-creating with wound are being asked to shed away. And that feels so physically unsafe in our bodies and our nervous systems to do that. And so if you're going through a time that feels a little crunchy, a little testy, a little heavy, a little challenging, just know that you're not alone because we are in a major karmic up-level moment. And when I was feeling into this, the card I pulled was the Wheel of Fortune, which is literally the tarot card of the wheel spinning and us entering a new energetic chapter. And we can't slow down the wheel. We can't change the passage of time. Like, we can only go with it. And it's sort of like a let go or be dragged situation because it's changing no matter what. And now we're in a place where we need new energetic strategies to show up there and to equip this next level version of self who's asking to come through. I've been going through this personally with family dynamics and old patterns that were so subconscious that I didn't even realize I had a choice in the matter. And I'm realizing like something that has historically felt so unsafe for me is to disagree or see something differently than a parent, because it's like my parents were the ultimate. I still think like my parents are the smartest people ever, and I respect my parents so much. But growing up, I came from a family where we debated everything. And if I had an idea or a viewpoint, I would run it by my parents, and if they didn't agree, I would immediately not trust myself, not trust my ideas, not trust my intelligence. And I would say, oh, okay, well, I can take anything and run it through my parents, and then I'll have the truth. And so now I'm an adult, and I am in a moment where my dad and I are like disagreeing on a lot of things post my mom's passing. And for the longest time, I was giving all my power away by trying to convince him to see my side. And so I won't get too into this, but it was such a revelation for me to be like, it's safe to disagree, and to even have a ripple effect into my whole life with that. And I'm sharing this just in case someone else resonates with this. But that's the moment we're in, where we're realizing these little internal shifts of where we give our power away and where we need new energetic strategies. And they can stem as far back as childhood or even ancestral patterns. And it's such a moment of cycle breaking. So I'll hand it over to you, Claire.
Well, I definitely am feeling that energy for sure. I definitely am feeling a lot of like past trauma stuff coming up. And I think it can be hard too to know how to move through it. Like, I think some of us are kind of unaware maybe of those things. And then I think some of us are very aware of like, oh, this is a past trigger. This is a trauma that I have that is rearing its head again. And the situation is bringing that out of me. And I think sometimes it can just be really hard to know like what to do, like how to heal that or move through it in a productive way and not just get like consumed by it.
Yeah. I think awareness is the first step of, that magical principle that to name something gives you power over it. So it's not just subconsciously pulling the puppet strings. Then I really think working with a professional in the space is so important because when we're so close to the wound, it can be so hard to detangle that knot ourselves. And if we could have done it earlier and sooner, we would have. But working with a professional in the space kind of gives us different insights and new ways of framing things. And also, professionals in the space have seen this situation over and over and over and have just a historical richness with how to approach it. And so I think working with professionals or getting into a system where you feel held, whether it's a workshop or a program, or even that might be helpful. But I think trying almost like self-divination, it's really hard to do this stuff for ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. And then just even going to what you were saying about disagreeing and speaking up for yourself, it's like I really relate to that too. I think I've been a real people pleaser. My family is all about like not rocking the boat, not making things uncomfortable. So we'll kind of agree to things that we don't want to agree to just to be pleasant and easygoing. And I notice with other people when they're in that energetic, it's like we are robbing everyone of a real experience when we are only taking care of other people and not taking care of ourselves. And disagreeing sometimes or stating your opinion is taking care of yourself as opposed to just like doing whatever you think the other person wants to hear. And I'm in an exchange with someone who behaves like that, and it's such an empty exchange. It's like I feel like he thinks that he's doing right by everybody, but because it's not coming from a genuine place, it feels completely empty, and it leaves me feeling like the exchange was false. And so I think we really rob ourselves and other people of having a genuine experience with us when we do what we think they want versus like really standing in our power and then allowing them to have a reaction from it and going from there.
I couldn't agree more. And that's not true love. That's not true love. It's a curated version of what the ego thinks you should show up as to be worthy of love. And so I think that is so important because it translates to both of our situations. Like that isn't true love, and not feeling safe to disagree is not true love. I think, that's what I'm learning is like when you disagree with someone, it doesn't mean you can't be close to them anymore. I can be such an intense Scorpio where I'm like, it's all or nothing. Like we either see everything the same or you're dead to me. And so I think that's what I'm working on too, is like, no, I love you and I can empathize with your perspective, and that's your consciousness at that moment, my consciousness at this moment. Like, let's just move forward because the love is more important. And that never felt safe. And it's so funny because like, I've been going through this journey with my dad, and my dad is an Aries and I'm an Aries rising, and we can just lock horns like no freaking other. But like, I kind of have a joke with Ari right now because he knows I'm working on feeling safe to disagree. So he'll just like say something and I'll be like, I disagree, and walk away. Or like he asks me like to do something, I'm like, I disagree, and I just walk away. So it's kind of funny.
But that's great, right? I think the way we can make steps towards that is like in the micro moments. You know, it's like, how can we, in the easier, tiny moments, like stand up for ourselves and assert and be like, You know what? I don't feel like strawberries today, actually. Thank you." Versus just being like, "Oh, he got the strawberries, so I guess I should eat them. I don't want to be rude." You know, it's like nobody wants you to eat their strawberries if you don't want to eat them. That's not doing a favor to them. This is a weird analogy, but you get it.
I get it. I get it. And I think it's like creating new neural pathways that enforces a new pattern of behavior that we've never done before. And like I always say in angel readings, it's clunky to learn a new dance. And we got so perfect at doing the old dance. And when you learn a new dance, you have to think about the steps and you mess up and you're really in your head and you're questioning everything. But after a long enough time of doing a new dance, you don't have to think twice about it. And so to wrap everything up, that's the moment we feel in. Like we are learning a new dance. It feels a bit clunky. We can romanticize the old dance because it felt easier. And we just need to move forward with the new dance and it will pay off in the long run.
Yes.
So let's get into the topic today. It's so funny because before we recorded, I was like, Claire, let's just get right into the topic. And then as soon as we hit record, I just went on a tangent.
It was important to say.
Yeah, sometimes that happens where me before we hit record and me after record, it's like, oh, okay, our angels have stepped in and I'm actually just got a breaking news report. There is something I need to share. But something I'm noticing too is that I can have really bad memory with remembering what I talked about. And so this is part 3 of the Arthur Findlay College, my experience there with my mediumship journey. If you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2, I really encourage you to do that before we get into part 3, but they all work as standalone episodes too. So I'm realizing if I repeat myself, I'm so sorry because there was about a month and a half in between recording part 1 and part 2, but there's like a week in between part 2 and part 3, or maybe a week and a half, and I'm realizing I remember the same amount. So I'm sorry in advance, but I'll try my best. So something that I realized after part 1 and part 2 is that I need to emphasize more of what's called sitting in the power, because this is a really key foundation of the spiritualist movement. So sitting in the power is basically what they teach you at AFC. It's their version of meditation. And it's like the foundation for everything. And so basically, let me rewind. So there's this beautiful room at the college. It's called the sanctuary, and it's so beautiful. It's where all the teachers do their demonstrations, and every single morning on this course at the school, which was Eileen Davies's course, Aspiring to Excellence, every single morning at 9 a.m. after breakfast, we would sit in the sanctuary in silence, sitting in the power for 30 minutes. And that was so amazing to me. And so historically, I feel meditation, if you told me you're to meditate for 30 minutes every morning, I would feel a lot of resistance to that. Let's just say that. It's a hard one for me. I'm not like a super meditator. But sitting in the power is a little bit different. So where meditation feels like stilling your mind, quieting your mind, sort of in this observational place of just flow, and it is beautiful. Sitting in the power is like directing your focus. It's a similar concept of shutting down your mind, but it's also just attuning yourself to the spirit world that's all around you and sitting in the presence of spirit. And so it's like this joyful, beautiful experience to me that just clicked. And for some people, meditation really works for them, and that's amazing. But for me, my practice has shifted astronomically since I switched to sitting in the power. And so the power is basically a shorthand for spirit, but it's also that electric force of connection within us. And the more that you sit with spirit in the power, it's as if every time you make contact with the spirit world, there's like another drop of that power in you. And it builds up and builds up and builds up until your capacity to get clearer messages, more evidence, longer sustained connections builds up with the amount that you are letting this power current co-create and flow through you. It expands your vessel every time you do that. And when you sit in the power, You can also set different intentions at the top. So lately I've been setting the intention of like, I'm sitting with you, Spirit. And I like to call it sitting with Spirit, which is sort of why I have the segment at the end. And so I say like, I'm sitting with you, Spirit, just like, please fill up my cup so that I can be of service for all my clients. And like show up to everything I have to do. And so they will work with you. You can say like, I'm sitting with you, Spirit. I'm open to receive healing from you. Or I'm sitting with you, Spirit. Please take the heaviness off my heart. Or I'm sitting with you, Spirit. Please share with me any truth you want me to have, or just help me build the power. Like you can set different intentions. And I also like to switch it sometimes to sitting in the presence of angels. So this can work with your angelic guides as well. And I do love to sit with angels. And the other beautiful thing about sitting in the power, especially if you're clairsentient like me, and I know I've spoken about this like to some degree on previous episodes, is that you start to recognize what spirit feels like when they step in with you. And when you can replay that feeling for yourself, you can link with them faster because you remember the feeling, and even just the act of remembering the feeling draws them closer and can make a link. So it's really, really beautiful. And something that I realized is that before I went to the college, my life was so go, 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 go. Like the idea of 30 minutes for any type of meditative act was like so absurd to me. But it really takes your practice to the next level. And so I would maybe meditate like 5 to 10 minutes a day and be like, I'm good. And so just being in this idyllic English countryside vibe type of place where it's just beautiful outside, and just being in a group of 100 mediums and just sitting every single morning, it was tangible the way that spirit was with us in that sanctuary. And so that was one of my biggest takeaways from my whole Arthur Findlay College experience, was the shift to learning to sit in the power and also creating more space for silence in my life. Like silence is so important. And I feel like I am so guilty of this, especially with running 2 different social media accounts and all of these things. It's like I fill in every spare second I have with a task or something else that needs to get done. And I'm sure I'm not unique in that because we're all very busy, especially here in the States. And so just being in this place where I had permission to just be and breathe, like the best way I could describe those 30-minute sessions were euphoric. Like I would feel high. I would feel so loved. I would get clear, amazing messages. Like one of the messages I shared, I forget which episode it was. I think it was 112, when they said like shift worry to wonder. Like that's something that came through at Arthur Findlay on one of the mornings where I was sitting in the power. And so that was one of the biggest takeaways. And so you can think of it like sitting with your spirit guides or sitting with your past loved ones, and you can picture yourself like just on a bench with spirit. Like you can create any visualization that helps get you into it, and then just stay open to receive and just imagine them drawing close and set your intention at the top. And if 30 minutes feels overwhelming to you, I invite you to just try it once, because to me, time flew by. Like usually when I meditate, I'm like half opening my eyes like every 30 seconds. And I'm like, I think we're done. But like with sitting in the power, I had my eyes closed, the whole time just in my own world. And all of a sudden the teacher was bringing us back and was like, okay, like that 30 minutes is up. And every time I would be so shocked that the 30 minutes was up because it just flew by and it felt so enriching. So that's just really, really beautiful.
I'm definitely going to try that. Because I actually really I'm like an avid meditator. I meditate every morning and I really love it and don't struggle so much with the whole like quiet your mind thing. Not that my mind is like totally quiet, but it just feels really good to take that space and that silence. But I love the thought of sitting and inviting spirit in all those ways. I'm definitely going to try that.
Yeah, it's really special. And my chart is almost all fire. So I think I struggle with meditation a little bit because, meditation works for a lot of people, like I was saying, and that's amazing. And for people who struggle with meditation, I invite you to try this shift because it really, really helped me. And then after the 30-minute meditations, we would come back and then different teachers each day would give us a lecture on something about mediumship right when we got out of it. And so it was really beautiful too, because we would come out of meditation and then we would be asked to hug our neighbor. So if you sit with people who aren't your usual group, and for me, I didn't know anybody. And on different days, I would get drawn to different parts of the sanctuary. Like on some days, I'd be in the first row. On other days, I'd be in the back. Some days, I'd be in the middle to the side, like depending on my mood and how visible I wanted to be and like how interactive I wanted to be with the teacher. But it was really beautiful, even coming out of the power and then hugging the people around you. And I remember there was one morning where we came out of sitting with the power. And if you listen to part 1 and part 2, you know, I went through a lot of my own grief and healing while I was at the college that came up, like a deeper layer of missing my mom. And I was hugging this woman, I think she was like from Arizona or something, after I came out of the power. And I just felt my mom hugging me through her. And it was like so visceral. Like I smelled my mom, like I knew it was her. I felt her energy, and she was like using this woman to hug me. And it was like such a powerful experience. And then I burst out sobbing. It was so deep. And then I just like sat like a little emo Scorpio under like a tree for a while and journaled. But yeah, sitting in the power, finding more room for stillness, like that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned at Arthur Findlay College. And I really encourage you guys to try it. And it's even so powerful as a group. So if you have a group of like spiritual women, or you're in a coven or whatever it is, or just a group of spiritual people, I encourage you to just sit together in the power and sit with spirit. And it's amazing how amplified it can be with the power of a group as well, especially of like-minded people. So I want to go into the teachings of Eileen Davies a little bit. So, you know, go back to part 1 where I intro her and talk about her, but she's an amazing medium. She's the first medium I saw demonstrate trance, which was amazing. And so her class was another really big breakthrough moment. So like I said, we meet with our groups most intimately, but then we can choose different teachers and go to their lectures and workshops, and we get to work with the mediums from all different levels. So I was in the sanctuary and Eileen was teaching, and basically we broke off into pairs and we were giving our partner a reading and seeing who came through in spirit. And then Eileen would go around and like give little course corrections. And so one of her big teachings that day was, when you're feeling stuck in a reading, when you're getting a lot of no's, to ask spirit, please show me something relevant to the sitter that they will understand. Like, what will make this make sense to them? Please show me what I need to see. And that was such a novel concept to me at the time. I was like, you can just ask? Wow. And so I really believe that spirit conspired to emphasize each lesson for each reading. So whatever I was learning and whatever the key takeaway was from the lesson, spirit would kind of make sure I got that in practice. And so I was sitting with this woman. She was from another country. I didn't know her, of course. And all of a sudden, you know, I was connecting to this man around her, and I felt like they were really close, and I felt that he had problems with women, and I felt like he was overweight, and I felt like he passed of something with his heart. But then I kept feeling an uncle vibe from him. And she was like, I don't know. Like, I don't have an uncle. I can't really take that. Like, I don't really know what you're saying. I was like, okay, the one thing I'm not sure of is the uncle thing, even though he feels like an uncle to me, which is kind of a gray area of like how relationships feel to you, because I can be projecting. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put this into practice. I was like, spirit, please, like, tell me anything that will make this information relevant to her. Like, what's the missing puzzle piece? And I just heard, my name is Peter. And so I was like, oh, wow, thank you so much. That would have been so great to know off the top, but all good, all good. And so I tell her, like, oh, he just said his name was Peter. And she was like, oh, Peter. Yeah, now that makes sense. Like, all of these things make sense for him. I was just thinking about an uncle, and I couldn't place any of these things for an uncle. I was like, okay. So I'm glad we cleared that up. But that was like another groundbreaking moment for me in my mediumship, and for people developing out there. Like, you can just ask, like, what is the relevant piece of information that will click this into place and then stay open. And the reason that I like that is because it's not a format that really involves your mind. It's not like, how did they pass? What's the relationship? Because then your mind can fill in a specific thing to just answer your question. But it's like, what's the next relevant piece of evidence that will make this make sense to them? And then it's completely open for just whatever you receive. So that worked really well for me, because I know I've said this before, like when I got caught up the most, and when I still do, is when people are like, but can you tell me this? Because that's when my mind starts to go. Like, I really do best just in a flow state with them for where I'm at in my development.
That's so wild. I love that. And also something that never occurred to me, that you could just ask.
Yeah. That's the funny thing, is like you really can just ask and they really do deliver. And so Eileen had a couple quotes I just want to read. So every single medium is different. And something I loved about Eileen is that she is she leans towards esoteric philosophy. She studies world religions. She loves poetry. There's a Native American, like, spiritual guy named Silver Birch. I have his book. I haven't read it yet, but she quotes him a lot. And so she really opened my mind to how beautiful all of the threads of spiritual connection through philosophy, world religions, and poetry can also be a way that we can expand our mind and how spirit speaks to us and different principles. Like, she really studies everything in the world and weaves it together in her teachings. And I find that so beautiful. And so she said some quotes that were just so beautiful. Also, something that she said that was part of her lesson that I really loved was, instead of saying like, what can spirit do for me? Coming into the world as a medium as, what can I do for you, spirit? How can I be in service to you, spirit? Because I feel like a lot of people on the spiritual journey dive into this world either as, I want to manifest all of my desires. I want to be absolved of the human experience. I want love and light always. I want to bypass things. I'm not saying everyone, but I think it's so beautiful to also flip the script and be like, what can I do to be of service? How can I help the world? How can I be a messenger for you, spirit? So that really struck me. And so one of her quotes was, those who are truly dead cannot speak. And that was such a beautiful quote to me, because I was like, that is so true. How am I speaking to these people if they're truly dead? Like, the physical body is truly dead, but their consciousness is not dead. It's existing in a new form all around us. And that was a huge takeaway as well, is that the spirit world isn't off on some cloud or another planet. It is superimposed over our world, and our physical body is a density that doesn't allow us to experience it without altering our consciousness. And so I found that to be so beautiful. She also said, and I believe this might have been a quote from Silver Birch, but I'm not positive. This wasn't her quote, but she said, I tread softly. The earth is sacred ground. Where I stand could be paradise. And I was like, oh my gosh, full body chills. And that's what I'm talking about, this kind of poetry, these deeper considerations. And I was so inspired by them, and they shift the way you think of things. And so I even think like going through a book of philosophy or spiritual musings or poetry, and just meditating on those things or letting spirit speak to you through those things. It's sort of like bibliomancy, where you ask your guides a question and then open up a book and point to a page and be like, oh, okay, that's what I need to hear about this. And I think poetry and spirit, Eileen Davies wove it together in a way that just made so much sense to me. And I just found these quotes to be really beautiful to contemplate. There was another exercise that we did with Eileen that I want to share with you guys, because I found it so powerful. So she gave us these wristbands, and on the wristbands it said, I am loving awareness. And so on the wristband, we had to basically be vigilant of our thoughts throughout the week at AFC. And if we said anything to ourselves in our mind that was not in alignment with loving awareness, we had to flip our wristband to our right hand. And for 40 days, so I was like, that's a commitment. For 40 days, we had to wear the wristband on our right hand. And if we thought of something or were mean to ourselves, we had to move it back until we went 40 days without speaking negatively to ourselves, and then move it back to our left hand where you could actually claim, I am loving awareness. And so it was a really beautiful idea of like a physical reminder of our internal dialogue. And I touch on that a little bit with my promise ring I wear to my, like my wedding ring, my promise ring I wear to my angels. You know, it's like sort of a similar physical representation of an internal vow. But I found that exercise to be really, really powerful too.
It's a real challenge and struggle for me, that like internal dialogue of, you know, negative thinking and harsh thoughts. And it's like sometimes it feels like we're doing that to like cope, but often I think it can make things worse. It's tricky ground. And I think making that pledge to yourself and really trying to stay true to that is just so beautiful.
Absolutely. And I think it really shows, it's really helpful to have a reminder. And I think that's why a lot of people get tattoos. You know, it's like, I want to remember this concept, or I want something in the physical world to, you know, be tangible for this more esoteric concept. And so I think a wristband, a piece of jewelry, like anything that works for you is a really helpful reminder, because we go through the world so busy and on autopilot, and it just reminds us to come back to where we're growing, what we're thinking about, how we can be more in alignment with love. And you don't have to be perfect with this. Like, I was probably the first person at the school to move my wristband to the other side. I was like, you guys are all freaking liars. I was like, go ahead and move your wristbands, y'all. I know that you have had one thought. Like, people were like going the whole week without removing it. And I was like, okay. Okay. Innocent until proven guilty, I guess.
I think too, like what you said, being easy with ourselves about it. It's like that type of reaction is so, or that's just like part of the human experience, and having that tool to remind us, it's like, that doesn't have to be like an oh no moment. It's just like, that's why the tool is there, to help redirect.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And you don't have to be perfect at it. And so I moved it like pretty shortly after. I was like, could I really be a medium? And I was like, oh, okay, I'm moving it over. And I'm sure my inner villain voice went a little harder than that. But, you know, and then I was like, oh, this is exactly what she was talking about. But if I didn't have the wristband on, it would just be another thing that was not commemorated. And that's what I feel like is so important, because sometimes we have internal shifts and they're not rewarded the same way that external accomplishments are. Can we throw a party for ourselves when we finally break a pattern of being? Can we treat ourselves the same way as when we get a new job or a raise or things like that? Can we commemorate and celebrate the internal things? Because sometimes when life just keeps going and we don't acknowledge what's going on internally, it tries to be louder and louder until we do, until it gets our attention. And so that's what I love about any physical thing. Like, what if you just like had a vase, and every time you did something nice for yourself or acted in alignment with power, you like put another flower in the vase, like it was your power bouquet, or anything we can have in the physical world to commemorate energetic shifts. Like, that's kind of what mediumship is. We're bridging the gap between the physical world and spirit. And anything we can do to bridge that gap, that's like the basis of ritual, altars, sacred space. Like, we can create that in creative ways for ourselves that make more sense in the modern world as well.
Yeah, I love that. That reminds me of your miracle journal.
Yes.
It's like a good place to take note so that we don't forget, and then in a moment when we're struggling, feel completely on our own or lost. It's like, no, I can circle back to that and see, like, look at all the times I was supported. Look at all the times I showed up for myself, or I felt spirit or my angels here with me, loving and supporting me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to get now into another teacher that we had, Chris Drew. He's a really amazing medium, and he was a tutor this week. that I was in. And I'm kind of just cherry picking some lessons that really resonated with me from these teachers. And I actually would love to have Chris Drew on the podcast. I'll see if I can reach out to him because he is so cool. So he used to be a drag queen and then he turned medium professionally, and he's an actor, and he jokes about it. He's like, first my parents were just coming to terms with me being like an actor and a drag queen, and now I'm a medium. He's just like so charismatic. He's so fun. And his workshop was on demonstrating. And so demonstrating was like, I went to that workshop just because I was so blown away by the idea of demonstrating. And I was like, what the heck? And the idea of standing up in front of a group of people and giving a mediumship reading to someone in the crowd was like so outside of my comfort zone. And if I'm being real, it still is. I've only done it twice. But yeah, Chris is just so fun and so cool. And he was telling a story about when he was demonstrating, and if he comes on the podcast, I'll probably ask him to tell it again because it's so amazing. And he had a little girl in spirit with him who was deaf. And she started guiding his hands to do sign language that her dad in the crowd recognized. He signed, not knowing sign language, sentences of evidence to the dad in the crowd. How amazing is that?
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
Yeah. He is, when I tell you, this is the kind of mother effing stuff at the college that blew me away. It blew me out of the water. And it's limitless. Like, I believe there's even a mediumship course there called No Limitations. Like, that is the attitude to go in with here, because the way spirit can work is insane. And so he was able to give this dad the greatest gift without a shadow of a doubt, that it was his daughter. And as a highly clairsentient person as well, who can like feel things through my hands, like, it just gives me chills because it's so powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a completely other language that this person was able to, it's like all of a sudden speaking Russian without having training, or yeah, that's just incredible.
I know. And mediums with strong clairaudience, like, they can pick up other words and other languages or things like that. It was kind of funny one time, and I don't consider myself super clairaudient. When I get names and stuff, I don't hear them as much as I know them. It's a little bit of a distinction. I just know their name instead of really hearing the voice of their name. And so one time I was giving a reading before I even went to AFC and before I was training, and I was like, this was the point where I was like, I need to either foster this or figure out what I'm doing here, because it was like starting to come into my readings more and more. And so this happens a lot where people ask me, like, if my loved one didn't speak English, can you still connect with them? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Because as I explained in part 2, spirit does not speak like you and I are speaking. They speak a language of sensory information, symbols, knowings, feelings, and that's their language. And so actual language that we have here is as important to spirit. Like, it's not important in the spirit world is what I'm saying. And so sometimes they'll use the language that they spoke as evidence, or sometimes it will be part of the message of like, I wish I could speak to her more, but I didn't speak English and my granddaughter didn't speak my language. And so I'll be like, okay, I feel like there was a communication distance and a language barrier there. Like, sometimes I'll use that as evidence, but they can still speak to me no matter what language or cultural background. And so I was giving a reading, an angel reading to this girl, and her Greek grandpa came through. And I didn't know he was Greek, but I kept hearing, like, forget the word now because this was so long ago, but it was the word grandfather in Greek. And I just like kind of knew that word, and it was popping into my head, and I was like, I just have to share this. And it meant so much to my client because she was like, that's what I called him, and he was Greek, like, amazing. And so language stuff is next level. Like, when you can bring that through for your client and they recognize it and they recognize the language, like, that really is cool. And part of the reason of sharing all of this stuff is to also expand your mind to what's possible. Because before I got to the college, like, one of the first things we did was make a list of like all the types of evidence that you could get. That was like our first thing we did. It was like, relationship, who they're with, personality, job, way they passed, age, whatever. And so language, like that's another thing to add to it. And when you have those parameters set, your mind is primed for spirit to send you new types of evidence. And I think as a medium, when you're working with spirit and you like break through a barrier where you get a new type of evidence, or because you can get into a groove where you're like, I'm always getting grandmothers with dementia and I'm just always sharing their messages, and so when you get into like a new type of evidence or a new type of connection, it's so exciting because it's opening up the parameters of where you can go. And so Chris, he had a really amazing point. And he basically said, just like being magnetic to people while you're here on earth, our spiritual growth makes us magnetic to spirit. And it makes you someone that spirit wants to work with and is attracted to. So just like when you sense somebody's energy is off in the physical world and they're maybe acting from a place of wound or hurt people or scarcity consciousness or limiting beliefs, whatever it is, or they're judgmental or whatever, and we're like, oh, I'm going to steer clear from this person. There's also the flip side of that, of like when you work on yourself and you're high vibe and you come into a room and it lights up and you're kind to people. That was something they stressed at the college so much, was the importance of kindness. They're like, when you are in that place, you're more of a magnet for spirit. And so I found that concept to be really beautiful too.
Yeah, that feels so real in life. Like I really feel like when you meet people, there is this like magnetism sometimes, and then also sometimes the opposite, where you're like, oh, we're like two of the same or whatever it is, and we're not vibing. And so it makes sense that that would carry over into connection with spirit. And also like the more high vibe we are, the more like in our light and our highest frequency we are, the more I feel like we attract all things to us. And so, yeah, it makes sense that we would then magnetize as well to spirit.
Absolutely. So that was such a cool reframe. And if you think about it, like even if you were trusting your kid or your pet or something that you really cared about, would you go to the person that doesn't take care of themselves, is kind of rude, is closed off? You can just feel something's a little off with them. And so for spirit on the other side, the love is not gone. They still want the best for their people here. They care about their people here, and they want to go to the medium that they feel is going to service them the best. And that's why at the college, like my mom didn't come through until like the very end, because that's when she felt like the mediums around me were like ready for her, and how heavy she knew I felt about the passing. Like, so that's another thing too, is that when the grief is still really raw, it's like the people in spirit really know like you need the right medium, and not just the right medium, but I had to be in the right place for it. And so I think that's another thing on the other side, if you're not a medium but you want to go to a medium, is that they don't recommend going until after 3 months somebody has passed over, because it's just so raw and it's very hard to get an evidential reading without completely breaking down and not being able to take the evidence. And it's too hard that soon. And I've also found from my readings that it takes spirits a little while to acclimate to the other side. And spirits that have been there longer are sometimes more practiced on how to play this game with us of getting the exact messages that we can understand to give to the sitter. Whereas like sometimes spirits that are brand new that I connect with, it's like they're in a wind tunnel trying to like shout through, and they're like, whoa. And I'm like, oh, did they pass recently? And they're like, yeah, they did. I was like, okay, well, they're doing an amazing job trying to get this to you. But it's kind of similar as people who are really good at lucid dreaming and walking through the dream world and controlling the dreams, I think it's a very similar sensation for our loved ones in spirit. Like, that's the feeling I get about it, is that dreams, you can direct your consciousness and start to like control them a little bit. And that when you're newer on the other side, it still feels like, okay, I'm getting the hang of this a little bit. So if somebody just passed and you're like, I don't feel them around or this or that, know that that's a very common experience because they're still getting the hang of things on the other side, but they will for sure send you signs, and there will be a lot of things that happen. And sometimes they just get strong signs to you right off the bat. My personal belief is that ancestors and spirit help them in the beginning, and everybody bands together so you get that sign and they kind of show them the ropes. But yeah, they'll get better and better at speaking to a medium as time goes, and they'll understand more and more. So if you have navigated a recent loss, just be patient with your loved one, be patient with yourself, and be a little wary of any medium who overpromises a little bit too much, because most mediums have come to the consensus that right after a loss isn't the best time to connect.
That makes sense. I'm sure it's very raw for the person who lost someone. And also, like you said, I'm sure they're acclimating. I loved the story you told about the person who was in a wheelchair and was like, sorry, I'm flying right now. Like, I'll check in later. I got to fly for a bit.
Yes, it's especially common with people who have suffered for a long time, like with a long drawn out illness and a lot of things. They're like, I am free as a bird, literally, and I just need to soar. I need to play. I'm reconnecting with my mom. They're like over there just acclimating and connecting, and that doesn't mean they don't care about us. It just means that they're getting the lay of the land. And I know firsthand how disappointing it can feel when you're not connecting with who you want to connect with. And that's kind of the funny thing about mediumship, is that sometimes who comes through is super surprising, especially if we've never met them before or don't feel a particular connection to them or whatever, but they often have an important message. And sometimes the people who are obvious that you want to hear from, you know their sign, you know how they feel about you. They come to you in a dream, you know more about them. Whereas sometimes the people who are less obvious, there's unfinished business, or you weren't as close to them, or they had something they always wished that they could have told you. And so it's more pressing. Something that I learned as well about mediumship is that sometimes spirits step in a certain order. So sometimes you want to hear from one person, but it's almost like the spirits that come before are paving the way for that person to come in. So I think that also has to do with like the kind of group effort around you, and also, you know, spirits who are more practiced at this. And so I was like reading for this girl, and her grandpa came in with like this loud personality, really big personality, telling me all about how he flew airplanes in World War II. And then he stepped aside. It was almost like, okay, now her mom can come in, but first I had to come in. And so I think sometimes we just have to flow with it too, because sometimes we can have this sensation where it's like, oh, this person's coming in, but my client really wanted to hear from this person, but you just need to trust the flow of what's coming in. And another thing that can happen, which can be really difficult on a new medium, and this happened to me like every reading for like 3 days at the college, and I was like, this is overwhelming, but they really wanted me to get the lesson, where sometimes two spirits will step forward at the same time. And you'll be like, oh, okay, there's a grandma here and a dad here, and they're coming in together. And I think for the longest time, I would just freeze and be like, what do I do? Like, who do I talk to? And then I wouldn't say what I was getting. I was just confused because I was used to one at a time. But I think with that, what I learned is that you just have to call it out. Like, okay, I have a woman here who feels like a grandmother. I have a dad. They're stepping in together. And even that can be evidence for the sitter in a way that you don't expect. Like, oh, they're together. That makes sense. Or, yeah, my dad and his mom are in spirit. And that makes sense that they would come in together. And then you just kind of have to even ask spirit, like, you know, which one wants to step in closer? Like, can I please speak to one of you at a time? And then you can start to feel which one you're going to make a stronger link to. But sometimes they can step in together and it can be a little bit more complicated, but it's more of an advanced concept to say who's with this spirit, because that can happen too, where you can start to pick up on, the whole family who's around, and they start to like pass you around as if you're a phone at a party, and you hear things in the background and people are trying to talk, and they're like so excited to have a medium tell their person that everyone is here and they can all pile on. So if you're a developing medium and you are getting information and then all of a sudden it's a no, it's a no, it's a no, you might be with a new spirit and you might not realize that yet.
I have a tangent question from that. And if it's too much, we can tackle it in a listener question. Are we then in spirit forever? Or like if we reincarnate, are we no longer, like let's say my grandmother passes and then is she always going to be like in spirit for me to connect with? Or does she then like move to another realm? Or if she reincarnates, will she no longer be in a place where I could like connect with her?
So this is a really good question. And I cannot say that I know without a shadow of a doubt, because I don't think that anybody can while we're in a physical body, but I have my suspicions. And so what I'll say about this is that I do believe in reincarnation, but I believe when the soul reincarnates, it's coming into a new slice of consciousness. So that soul that was your grandma in that timeline is now going to be a baby boy in a new timeline. And that there might be some bleed over or some blend of who they were in the past, especially with soul lessons and bigger picture things. But the ego story of who the quote unquote soul is while they're in a human body, I think is completely different, but that the soul is the same. So if we're thinking about life in a quantum way, which I believe reality is more everything everywhere all at once vibes, that part of consciousness that was your grandma still exists. But the soul, it's like that her consciousness is, I don't know, a part of the oneness that went back to the whole. But now the ego story of this boy who's playing out a new vibe as like part of her soul also exists. So it makes me wonder, it's like if past lives are even an accurate phrase, or if it's just present, past, and future, all versions of ourselves coexisting at once. If time doesn't really exist and it's just our body that anchors us into a timeline. So maybe I'm a witch in Salem right now, and I'm me, and I'm a little boy in Africa all at once. So I think that it's more complicated, and I'm very wary of people who act like they have it all figured out and try to superimpose human logic and rules onto something that is so much bigger than us and be like, you're a level 5 soul and that means this and that means that. Like, I'm not saying that that's not accurate or that they're not tapped in. I'm just wary of it. It doesn't super resonate with me off the bat because of how big and beautiful and amazing. And I think it's human nature to want the answers, to want to feel like we have control, to want to feel like we know everything. And I just don't think we're meant to. I think that's why that's something that organized religion has got right, is like faith. Faith in something bigger than us, but we don't realize that something bigger in us is us. It's a part of us that remembers who we are. Yeah, I think that, past lives, future lives, present lives are probably all happening at once. And the aspect of our grandma that was our grandma, and some people will say like, we go back to spirit and then we sit with like a soul planner and they're like, yeah, this is going to be your next life. And then this is going to happen. And maybe that's true. Like I said, I can't know, but I feel like there's something bigger in nature. But I do know that when we go back to spirit, some people stay in spirit forever because it's pure bliss. And some people are like, I need to go help humanity. I need to go break cycles in this bloodline. I need to go learn this lesson. I want to go experience something. I want to experience duality where spirit world is pure oneness of love. So yeah, I think that it's layered and a really cool concept, and 100% I believe it's totally up to us. I believe in free will of if we want to come back or not.
That's awesome. Thank you. That was a beautiful explanation, and I agree. I think it's really cool to tap in and connect to what we can, and also stay in the wonder and the understanding that we're probably not supposed to fully grasp it, because when we're there, we'll fully grasp it. And this is not an experience about that. It's about the duality. It's about the humanness of it.
Absolutely. And I feel like I should be more curious than I am. Like, I feel like I should tap in and be like, what can you give me irrefutable evidence, or what's going on, or what happens when we join spirit? But I don't even feel the inclination to go there. For some reason, I'm just all about like more micro connections and helping people one on one and things like that. But I think as my progress and evolution and development grows, maybe I will go to more bigger concepts. I think there's a book, I forget the author's name. I want to say like Donald Neil Walsh, or I'm not sure, but it's called Conversations with God. And it's basically this guy who's in a like channeled writing state, asking questions to God and then writing the answer. And I've only read part one, and I read it years ago. I think I read it when I was 21. And I remember being really impressed by that book and resonating with a lot of what he said in that book. So might have to revisit it, because that's a good book to go to for bigger picture questions. And I find that that is where, going back to Eileen Davies and her connection to like philosophy, world religions, and poetry, I feel like there's a lot of metaphors there for what it's like on the other side that just hit us in a soul remembrance way. Like that quote of, I tread softly, the earth is sacred ground, where I stand could be paradise. To me, if you take a deeper look at that, it says the spirit world is all around us. And where we stand right now, all different forces of love are converging right behind our shoulders that we don't see. And that is this paradise that if we just shifted our senses, we could open to the paradise of the spirit world that's all around us. And so there's so many ways to interpret these things. But I think when people are in higher states of consciousness and they're in a creative flow, a lot of answers are hidden plain sight through poetry and divine creation, and even in nature. I feel like nature and the natural world has so many metaphors and leads us with so many answers that are perfect metaphors for our human experience and the spirit world too.
Yes, I agree with that so much. Especially nature. It's like just the beauty of nature anchors you into the present moment in such a specific, visceral way. The feeling of the breeze, the beauty of a flower. It's like when you take that in, you're only in that moment experiencing those things. It's so varied and intricate. Yeah, it's such a great anchor point. When I'm feeling lost, I need to go into nature, and it immediately anchors me into the moment.
So beautiful. And I feel like nature and a disconnection from screens and noise and all of that, that's where the veil is thinner between us and the spirit world. That's where we start to tap into the numinous and something a little bigger than ourselves. And that's where like the awe of nature comes from. And that same awe that you feel when you climb a mountain and you see a view that just is breathtakingly beautiful is the same full body experience I get when I make a link to the spirit world. So I'm realizing now that we'll need a part 4, which I'm just going to stop acting surprised because there's so much to say about this. Part 4 will go more into the experimental side of the college with table tipping and sitting in a cabinet and all of that fun stuff. But I want to just round out my first week at the college and a last story from that, because I feel like I've done it justice. It's like I can never encapsulate just how magical it was, but I hope I've done it justice and piqued your curiosity and whet your appetite and given you some ideas for development and to practice on yourself and, you know, all of the fun parts of this. So for the last part of the week, and they like to just get you with surprises. Like I felt so blindsided by this, but for the last day, it's almost like a final exam, quote unquote, where they take 3 students from each of the 5 groups, and you have to go into another group of people that you don't know and haven't been working with and demonstrate for them. And so keep in mind, and I know I've said this ad nauseum, I was the most beginner group of that week. So it was so scary to go into any other group because you're with people like that was our little safety zone crew. I was like, you guys, we can't leave the group. Like, we're all so chill in here. What do you mean go to a more advanced group and demonstrate for them? So that week, like towards the end, people started falling ill. And this was September 2023. And we were like, oh gosh, COVID. And every single freaking morning in the sanctuary, we're all hugging each other. So things were like spreading. And it turns out, I think somebody at the school had COVID and it just like completely spread. So my teacher was like going around the room and like 3 people in our group were sick. And she was like, you have an option if you want to present, because I know you're feeling sick. You also have an option if you want to present. She's like, Taylor, you don't have an option. Like, you have to demonstrate. And I was like, copy that, Suzanne. And she was like, you guys are going to go off to the other group. You're going to give a good demonstration and you're going to return like proud heroes of war. And I was like, okay. It was like so dramatic, but it was so scary. And so I went out into the grounds and I was like having my cup of tea for the UK people. And I was like so jet lagged, and I don't usually have too much caffeine, but like every day at 11 and 4, my eye would twitch and I would just like down green tea and black tea and be like, I need energy. So I'm out on the grounds. I'm like twitching on caffeine. I'm having a panic attack that I have to go into another group and demonstrate. My I am loving awareness bracelet is firmly on my other side with all of the thoughts that are going through my head. And I'm just sitting out there, and my friend Mark comes out. And Mark, you know, I spoke about him in part 1. He's my friend, and he's sort of turned into a bit of a mentor. And so I was like, Mark, I got asked to be one of the demonstrators for our group. I'm so scared. And he's like, Taylor, Spirit picked you for a reason. That was such a bad accent. He's not Irish. I'll never try that again. And it was like such a like cinematic moment. Like there was like the pastures with the horses and like the trees flowing and like butterflies. And I was like on this bench, and it was like all leading to this moment. And I was like, Mark, that is exactly what I needed to hear. Spirit picked me for this for a reason. I can trust that. So at this time, I start like kind of getting a little hot and sweaty. And I was like, is this just nerves? But I was starting to catch COVID. So towards the end of the day, I have a fever going and I'm starting to get anxious. And so I've had COVID twice. This was my second time having COVID. And I didn't realize it at first because sometimes, like the first time I got COVID, it started as almost an anxiety attack. And I don't know if that's because of just all the news about COVID and all the things about COVID, but it just starts as like an anxious feeling, like both times I've had COVID. So I wasn't sure, like, am I just anxious about demonstrating or is something going on? And then in part 1, when I told you I thought someone in the group was a medical intuitive, he was just looking at me. And I was like, he knows. I was like, he knows. And he was like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I gotta go demonstrate. And I was like, so we go into the other group, and this is when my fever really starts. Like, my fever started breaking, and I realized like COVID was coming on as I was like doing my second demonstration ever. So we go into this other group, and I'm standing up there in front of everyone. And 2 of the people in that group are actually in my mediumship circle now. And so it's like, you know, it's funny because I know them better now. But I stand up there and I go up and I start to close my eyes. And the teacher's like, no, you're not allowed to close your eyes. You have to keep them open. And so I'm like, dealing with COVID, I have to keep my eyes open, and I'm just like thrust in front of this group of strangers, and it's like, now connect, get out of your head and connect. And so up until this point, my clairvoyance had shown up as almost flashes of light behind my eyes that took different shapes. So I had a girl in my group named Ashley, and she was a medium from Australia who was super sweet and really talented. And I was talking to her about it, and I was like, I'm so frustrated. My clairvoyance only comes as flashes of light behind my eyes that take different shapes, but like I know it can be so much richer. And she's like, you just have to practice it with your eyes open. Like, I promise you, you will get more vivid pictures, and it's almost like a flash of a photograph or a clip of a something instead of flashes of light. Like you have to push yourself. So I was like, okay, this is the moment. And so I'm up there, and I think the nerves of everything like really helped speed up my system and help me make a link. But I connect with this like sister energy, and I had to keep my eyes open. So Spirit basically instructed me in the moment of like, stay in the feeling. If you can't rely on your sight, stay in the feeling. So I really doubled down on like what she felt like, what her personality felt like, any illnesses in the body I felt. I just really relied on feeling. And then I finally got a flash, like a picture for the first time. So this was really special to me. And that's where it's like out of the fire and into the pan, or whatever that saying is, where it's like, if you don't push yourself out of the nest, you'll never know. And it truly, the stakes felt like at 100. In reality, in retrospect, I was just in a room with like supportive mediums who wanted me to do well. But like, I truly did feel like I was going to war. And so I got this flash, and it was like this lady in a bed, and the wall was yellow, and I saw another lady fluffing up her pillows. And so the message there was, when everyone else, and they were alone, and I got this like kind of sad feeling, like everyone else gave up on her a little bit except this person. And this person would come even when everyone else thought she was out cold and didn't know what was going on. She would change the flowers, she would fluff up the pillow, she would take care of her. And the message was, I saw that and I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. I felt so loved. And her personality was kind of like down on herself. And this person was the one person who really talked her up and supported her. And it was just such a beautiful sisterly relationship. So someone in the group was like, I can take everything you're saying, but she's not my sister. So that started messing me up. Then I started getting in my head, and I was like, cousin, friend. I just like started like saying things. And then I was like, okay, I'm getting off track. Like, okay, if she's not your sister, let's just leave that. I keep going. More of the stuff makes sense, give the message. Thank you for always being the one to believe in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Everything makes sense. It was beautiful. And at the very end, she goes, yeah, everything was right, except she was my sister-in-law. And the teacher was like, you could have given that to her. Even the teacher, who was like a little bit more on the strict side, was like, okay, this is a teaching moment, that if you feel like somebody is a mother or somebody is a this, but they're saying no, they weren't, then you can say mother figure, sister figure, or you can say sister-in-law and add the in-law, and you might get a yes, because sometimes people are really picky, and that's okay. That's the point of evidential mediumship, and I get that. But it's like, girl, we're all practicing here. You could have given me sister-in-law, and I like have COVID and I have to keep my eyes open.
Yeah, that is a sister.
I know, exactly. That the first word of that title is sister, but that was kind of funny, but it taught me a good lesson. And it taught me that you can be giving so much evidence, and still, if you say one thing that bumps the sitter, they'll be like, I don't actually know who this is. So you have to find ways to be like a mother figure, or, and that's like, that can be tricky too when you lead with the relationship, because sometimes grandparents act like parents and raise the kids. And so there's like father figure would make more sense than a dad, So that was a really good lesson for me. And that was my second time demonstrating. And I overall did feel good about it. And I learned a lot about it, and it pushed me to develop my clairvoyance in real time a little bit more. And so I went back to the group, and we were all like truly as predicted, like heroes of war returning home, just like telling our stories and feeling stronger for it. And it was so cool and such a good experience. And like I said, I was never expecting to demonstrate, much less twice in 1 week. So it super pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons from every single thing that week. And it was truly amazing.
I love that they did that for you guys too. It's like, it is such a scary thing to push ourselves like that. And sometimes we won't make that choice. And I love that they didn't just let you kind of ride with the training wheels on. Like, she was like, no, you cannot have your eyes closed. And maybe that was like frustrating or scary in the moment, but it led you to see your abilities in a new way. And if we don't do that, we miss out on the gift of that exploration.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm so grateful. And I've said this in previous episodes, that I do better with teachers that push me a little bit, because it's like sink or swim, except, you're just on a cushioned carpet and nothing's going to happen to you if you sink. Yeah, no, it was exactly what I needed. It was the push out of the nest, and everything about that week was like a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit out of my comfort zone, and that's how you expand. That's how you take up the space. That's how you fill a new container. And it's always going to be like, can I really fill this new container? Am I big enough to fill this new container? It's like you'll never know until you enter that new container. And that's why I say self-doubt is actually a good sign because it shows that you're on the verge of breaking out of a comfort zone.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah, and everybody was so supportive, and I'll think back on that group and that week and our tutor, Suzanne Gibson Foy, with such fondness. And like you said, I wanted to be held to that standard. I think that's why subconsciously I chose a class called Aspiring to Excellence. And it wouldn't be the same aspiration to excellence if I went into that demonstration with all my safety crutches. So I'm happy that she took it away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, it's so special to reminisce on this time and think back of all of this. And I hope that this encourages people to go to the school because it's a really special place. And I do feel like part of the reason I'm called to share so in depth about it is so that people know what an amazing, beautiful place exists, because I think the community there is a little bit older and they're not super on social media, and there isn't that much, like, it's kind of the best kept secret, this school. And so I'm putting it out there so aligned people can find the school, so that the school can thrive, so that aligned students can find their home that they've been looking for. And that's how I felt there. I truly felt like I was coming home, and it was just such a special experience. So I hope to support the school as well in my own way through this series.
It's beautiful. It sounds like such a magical place, just both in the building and the energy and the aesthetic, and then also just in what they're teaching there and the experience you can have there.
Absolutely. And I've said before that I'm hypercritical of things. Like, I'm not super in the space of just floating away on a cloud. And I really like the grounded approach of this college. Like, that's what really felt like home to me. Like, I could get on board with everything they were saying and everything they were teaching. And it felt so peaceful because I feel like there's certain crevices of the spiritual world that are predatory or, cult-like or not grounded in evidence. And I definitely am not casting shade. I'm just saying I don't resonate with some of the more airy-fairy stuff that isn't grounded or is based in spiritual bypassing or is based in wishing we were on another planet instead of fixing the one that we're on. And so I felt like the English approach was really powerful because they were no nonsense, but then they were extremely tapped in and magical people. And it was almost like casual to them. They were like, yeah, this is what we're doing here. And like, I don't know, their brand of magic really resonated with me.
So cool to know that there's a school doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We probably have, do you have another little nugget? We probably have like another 10 minutes if you have something you want to add in.
There was one last thing I can talk about from week 1, and then we'll be clearly into week 2.
Perfect.
Something that was kind of cool was at the end of the week, you can get a spiritual assessment from the teachers. So they basically tune into your energy and they're like, here's your strengths, here's what you can work on, here's what Spirit's saying for you. And so I went into a spiritual assessment with my teacher, Suzanne, and she was like tuning into my energy, and she was like, okay, the angel stuff, but the evidential mediumship stuff is also really here, and Spirit's saying they want you to do this work for a long time. But they're also saying that for you, one of your gifts is inspired speaking, where Spirit can speak through you. And they're saying you need to share your voice in a bigger way. And so what was really interesting to me was that this was before we even started talking about Magic Hour podcast. So when I got home to the States, like literally the day after I got home from Arthur Findlay College, I was on the Expanded podcast talking about healing the witch wound with Jessica. So I was like drinking matcha latte after matcha latte, just like trying, I was like cracked out, just trying to be awake. But there is something that happens where as soon as I hit record, I step aside for something bigger than me to speak. And I did feel that came in during that episode as well. But after the episode, Jessica was like, I really think like you should create your own podcast. She was like, you just have such a strong voice and so many important things to say. And so it was 2 times in a row where I got that message. And I was like really sitting with that. And I was like, you know what? I do really feel called to do this. And then we talked about it and everything just kind of flowed one thing into the next. So I found that to be a really cool synchronicity too, how I felt like Suzanne was leading me, helping giving me a piece of that puzzle. There is one last thing I want to talk about, which is basically like I caught the bug, not just COVID. I caught the mediumship bug. And there's something about mediums who cannot get enough of mediumship. Like it is almost like a drug. It is a calling bigger than ourselves. And it's even different than angel readings because I do feel that with angel readings. But mediumship almost has this urgency behind it where it's like the spirit world is calling and it makes me want to constantly develop, connect, practice, get better. Like as soon as I got home, I was like, who can I work with? Like I need a mediumship circle. Where can I find mentors? Like I want to keep working. I want to keep developing. I want to get better and better and better because if you listen to part 1, that first demonstration really showed me what was possible for me. So I feel like how to know that you're meant to do this work, or a part of knowing that you're meant to do this work, is just this feeling of I can't get enough. Like I want to keep going back. I want to keep learning more. I want to be in better service to the spirit world. I want to keep sitting in the power, like this hunger for connection with them. And so like, that's what I was telling my husband, because he's like, whoa, like 0 to 100 with the mediumship stuff. And I was like, I know, but it just feels like something bigger than me is pushing me to do this. And it feels addictive and euphoric and beautiful. And also the power that it has with the clients and the sitters and how it affects them and helps them heal. It's just so beautiful. And I truly can't get enough of it. So I feel like Arthur Findlay College, like I caught the bug there. And, I'm continuing to develop. I have a mediumship circle. I work with a handful of different mentors, and I just find this whole world and the people in it really beautiful and really inspiring. And a lot of them are just casually amazing, like so accurate, so psychic, so amazing, but so casually amazing. And in the fact that they're just like, yeah, this is what I do. Like, it's not a big deal. And so, yeah, it's opened my mind. And I think that was one of the biggest takeaways from week 1 is like, wow, I've caught the bug.
I think too, like, I mean, I do all your scheduling, so I really interact with everyone that comes to you for a reading, and I've really noticed the push of excitement that you adding the mediumship to the readings has created. And, I think the concept of angels can be a little like hard to nail down or hard to fully grasp, because also you've talked about this, that the word angel is just a limited word to kind of encapsulate something that is indescribable. And, I've had readings with you, and I know for everyone else who's had readings with you, it's such an incredible experience, and connecting to our angels and guides and hearing what they're trying to communicate and how they're supporting us is just incredible and magical. And usually there's evidence within there that feels really like irrefutable, like you are clearly tapping into something connected to me. But I think the extension then of that with the mediumship, it's like another link that makes the message feel so much more powerful, because it's based in this relationship that so deeply affects us, and the evidence creates that link where it's like, wow, she's really connecting to this person. So the message can hit so much harder or deeper even maybe than even the angel messages do. And of course, together they make this beautiful tapestry. But yeah, it's just been really exciting to see how beneficial it's been for people and beautiful. And I wish for everyone to get to have this experience with you, because I know it just can really like create just such a healing balm for us when we've lost someone, knowing that like they're still with us and that the love we have for them is still being felt.
Thank you so much for that. I love that. And it's so true. And sometimes The angel messages take more time to make sense, whereas the mediumship messages make sense right now. And so the angel messages are even more validated by the mediumship messages. And I've loved fusing both types of energies together in readings because they're like, okay, I can validate all of these things about my grandpa that she just said. So that makes me trust more in what my angels are saying that I can't instantly validate, but they're showing me like the direction to go and where I might, like they're showing me a pathway, and I can trust that pathway a little bit more, seeing the accurate evidence that my past loved ones are giving. So I think that that's definitely been a nice added layer to the sessions that have just made everything so rich. And I think our loved ones and our angels work together, and our angels will say something, and then the exact loved one that needs to come through with either a message of healing or something similar they went through in their life. Like those are the people who come through sometimes in angel readings to hit again another aspect of that healing, that lesson, that dynamic that will be most helpful. So they piggyback off of each other. And I think that's really beautiful too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that concept of just thinking of them being here, guiding us.
Yeah, absolutely. So stay tuned for part 4, where I'll go into some of the more playful, experimental, and truly wildest weeks of my life. And I think that 3 parts to wrap up the first week did it justice, because there's, of course, so many other things I could go into, but I think I really hit the main points, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. So let's transition to sitting with spirit. Back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves. For those of you that are new to the podcast, this is a segment where I sit with spirit very similarly to what I discussed in the beginning of this episode, and give the messages that will help the most people. So just know that a lot of people listen to this podcast. If the messages come through for the spirit section with who's in spirit and they don't resonate with you, that's okay. Don't make them fit. Resonance is one of the powerful tools in our spiritual toolbox to know what is for us and what isn't. And I would appreciate if you could send the message or the episode to somebody that you think would resonate or would help them in this moment. It means so much to me, and also, I'm sure, the spirit world. So I did have a female past loved one stepping in today, and I get the feeling that they were being deliberately vague on evidence because they wanted more people to connect. So it feels like it's this group of sort of mother figures, mother energy that are stepping in really close, because it feels like a lot of people need to be held right now. It feels like a lot of people are going through times of major transition and growth and fear and unknown. And like there's this universal feminine mother energy that is coming in to tell you you are held, you are supported, it's going to be okay. And so I felt like the female energy that kind of presented itself did one spirit like kind of stepped out first, and they were giving me this feeling of passing from a stroke. I also felt like the color green was really important to this person. She felt very gentle, and I know that's kind of, not super out of the box for a mother, but she felt very gentle, so loving. She felt like your safe place. And in this world where we can feel really unsafe, especially in times of unknown and transition, there's this feeling here of like, I'm not gone. Even though you feel like your safe space is gone, I'm still here. I'm still supporting you. I'm still holding space for you. I also felt like there's a significant ring of hers that you would wear or be attached to. And I saw an oval stone. And keep in mind, if some of this stuff resonates and some doesn't, it can be little winks from your loved ones in spirit. Just take whatever resonates. And she was showing up with a male past loved one who was a little more quiet and gruff and wasn't really talking to me. Like she definitely seemed like the caretaker energy, the lover energy. She kind of had this Libra energy of like smoothing everything together and weaving everyone in. And he felt kind of more quiet and gruff, and maybe like she would take care of him, and she's with him in spirit as well. But I saw her sending you an owl. An owl is my symbol for trusting your wisdom. owl comes in a time where we need to see a bigger picture. The way they can turn their heads around almost 360 gives us new vantage points, new perspectives. And as a nocturnal animal, they come in times that feel dark or unknown so that they can help us navigate that. And so there was this message from this mother energy that's asking you to face your fears head on. There's something here about her soothing you and holding you and being your safe place, but at the same time, pushing you to navigate your fears head on because you are strong enough to confront them. You are strong enough to do that work. And like this universal mother energy is holding you through this big transformation and ultimately up level moment. And the message here is I see everything and I'm proud of you. So if you've been missing your mom or you feel like you need a boost of mother energy, like there is this mother figure just standing so close to you who sees you, who is proud of you, and who is guiding you, and who's just asking you to have faith to walk through the darkness, to trust your wisdom, and to confront your fears head on. And you are stronger than you even know. And so transitioning now to the messages from our angels, the first thing I want to say kind of piggybacks off of the tangent that I was on in the beginning, which I was telling Claire, I'm not going to say anything. We're going to go right in like I was saying. And then all of a sudden I was like, boo, 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 classic me. So the first thing I want to say is kind of a piggyback off of that, which is any relationship that you have to betray yourself to stay in is not worth it. Because ultimately what happens if you betray yourself long enough, you forget who you are, you forget your power, and you start to believe that this version of self who has self-sacrificed is the real you. And it starts to create new stories about what's possible. It starts to rewire your subconscious, and you start to lose yourself and your light. So any relationship where you feel like you have to push your own needs, your own power, your own barometer of truth and what you really want from your life and what you really deserve from your life down to keep it is not for the highest good. And I think that that is obvious on some level, but it's really sneaky on another level, especially when these patterns can be so ingrained in us, even from a level of what we witnessed in childhood. So I think this kind of goes hand in hand with this mother's energy, because I do feel like this more gruff male past loved one was her partner who she maybe had a more difficult relationship with. And there's something here about just going into the shadows, confronting things head on, and not dimming your light for other people. And so this is just so important overall, because as we're in this moment of up level and change and growth, the people that resonate with us might shift and change. What we want might shift and change. How we see the world might shift and change. And we just can't dim our light or keep ourselves small to meet other people's expectations anymore. It's time to prioritize our light. It's time to prioritize our power. It's time to prioritize our vision instead of prioritizing fear or scarcity consciousness or what other people expect from you, and hold the vision. And what I'm seeing now is that it can be so scary to walk through the dark and not knowing what's on the other side that sometimes it feels more safe to cling on to what we know isn't working, but because the fear of what we don't know is so much stronger. But that's where this like mother energy is leading you into this womb-like energy of rebirth, and you will be loved through it instead of being met with anything else that isn't working in this comfort zone that's not serving, which is having to push your light down. Ironically, heading headfirst into the darkness of the unknown is the most light-filled act. And so the last thing that your angels were showing me was a hanged man from the tarot. They showed me that tarot card, the hanged man. And when I see that, it's this feeling of like kind of a liminal in-between space where life feels a little bit upside down, and We don't know exactly what's coming yet. And a lot of things aren't exactly in our control yet, although some things are. And so the hangman energy is about seeing from new perspectives, flipping things upside down, making a new choice, being okay with the timing of how the puzzle pieces are falling together, and knowing that it's uncomfortable and vulnerable to be hanging upside down by your foot. But at the same time, how can you just find surrender there? How can you surrender to exactly where you're at and let this be a perspective shift for you? So if you're clear right now on what isn't working, but you don't exactly know what is going to fill the space yet, and you're in this kind of liminal in between, let yourself hang there for a while in the processing, the integration, the exploration, and slowly but surely this upside down place that you'll have been thrust in by either ending something or admitting something or excavating the heart space is going to give you a new perspective than if you stayed right side up attached to the tree in the way you've always been. Hanging upside down in the unknown for a little while is actually what will give you the next step or the next answer. So that's the feeling that I get, is that we're in this moment of just sort of hanging upside down, having faith in the bigger picture, and realizing that relationship with control that it always comes back to. And the hangman is like completely out of control, and that can be really scary. So try your best to trust the timing, let yourself hang a little bit, be kind to yourself, but most importantly, prioritize your light and don't be afraid to face your fears head on, because you might realize that the fear of the fear is worse than the fear itself. Anything you want to add, Claire?
Just another beautiful message that I definitely needed to hear. So thank you. I appreciate it. And
Same.
yeah, I think, we want to avoid being uncomfortable and in the crunchy, painful parts. But oftentimes, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll look back on those moments in my life with this beautiful tenderness, because it was a moment of deep connection with myself where, it was hard, but then when I get through it, I learned so much, and I see that it was actually helping me grow. So I think that's a good thing to remember when we're kind of in these moments of unknown, like you said. It's like clinging on to the thing we know will give us this same result, and choosing to step into the unknown can lead us to all sorts of gifts.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it just made me think of, tying back to the episode, that idea of physical representation of internal shifts. And I feel like maybe we can implement that to this version of self that has the courage to move forward, that has the courage to make a new choice, that has the courage to heal and to step into this next level version of self. And maybe there's a way we can bring that into the physical. Maybe there's a way that we can either create a shrine to who we're becoming, or we can wear a piece of jewelry that signifies who that vision we have for ourselves. And maybe there's a way to take these more cerebral, energetic concepts and remind us in the physical world that could be really beautiful to commemorate that. And what made me think about that is when you're like, I look back on those old versions of self with like such fondness, and so we can do the same with future versions of self and create, shrines to that, or odes to that, or write poetry about that, or whatever creative process resonates. And I think looking back on past versions of ourselves with gratitude is so powerful, because I just know our future versions are looking at us right now with that same feeling.
I love that so, so much. I'm going to try doing that today.
Yeah, I think that's just such a beautiful exercise, and it's something that's in our control right now to just do that. And who knows how that will shift our energy or our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, my loves. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful week. And remember to walk in your power always.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we will send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 111 5-star reviews.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page. Remember, you are magic.